The first time the doorbell rang at 3:03 a.m., I was half awake on the couch, the TV whispering through a blue haze of static after the streaming app froze. I'd worked late and fallen asleep with my clothes on, the tie still looped around my neck like a noose. It was the kind of sleep that never lands, thin, feathery, uncertain. So when the bell sounded, one clean, metallic chime, neither bright nor dull but precise, I sat up instantly, heart already a step ahead of me. I stared at the digital clock beneath the TV. The minutes glowed a cold blue, 3:03 a.m. The symmetry bothered me. It felt designed. Another chime followed, identical to the first, as if replayed from somewhere inside the walls. I held my breath and listened for evidence that this was a malfunction. The hiss of rain shorting the relay, the electrical hiccup of a dying circuit. But the night beyond the blind was dry and taut, as if the world itself had been ironed that I stood. The floorboards groaned under my left heel. I hated that noise, the way age betrays you. I drifted to the peephole and pressed my eye to the cold circle. Someone stood on the porch. A figure still and neat. Not a silhouette. A person with defined edges. They were positioned just beyond the cone of the motion light, leaving their face swallowed by a soft radius of shadow. I stared and felt the pressure in my eye socket grow. Peepholes magnify, distort, and the mind fills in what it can't see. I wanted to call out, but something, not fear exactly, something older and more ceremonial, kept me silent. The person, no, the figure, lifted a hand very slowly and pressed the doorbell again. The chime didn't come from the bell. It came from the hallway behind me. That IT was quiet, that sound. But I knew where the doorbell wiring should lead. The chime had always come from the wall above the closet door near the kitchen. A cheap white plastic box shaped like a loaf of bread. That was where guests made the noise of arrival. But this ring unfurled in the opposite direction, from somewhere deep in the house, echoing out of the vents. That I stepped back from the peephole. I felt watched from both sides. "Who is it?" I called. My voice sounded too clear, clipped, as if someone else had spoken and I was hearing it on a loop. The figure didn't answer. They held their posture, hands folded in front, as if waiting for a ceremony to begin. I eased the chain latch into place and cracked the door. Not much, just enough to slide out a sliver of air. "Can I help you?" The figure leaned forward so the motion light washed a fraction of their face. It was a woman, not young, not old. Her skin had that unplaceable quality you see in mannequins. Flawless until the second your eyes try to measure it. Her mouth was small, calm. Her eyes were, I nearly said mirrors, but that wasn't quite right. They reflected less than they refused. Not black, but not absorbing light either. The light seemed to go around them. "May I come in?" she asked. Her voice had texture. You could feel a cold room on the other side of it. That I almost said yes. She sounded like a neighbor requesting a cup of sugar for a recipe. I could already picture the exchange of politeness. She'd step in, we'd laugh about the hour. I'd call the situation wild and she'd say, thank you so much. And then, "Do you live nearby?" I asked. "No. Do you need help? Should I call someone?" Her small smile didn't move. "I rang the bell," she said, as if that were reason enough. "May I come in?" Something moved beyond her. A shadow passing across the lawn where nothing visible could have cast it. The motion light didn't react. I shut the door and slid the chain off by reflex, then stopped and put it back, palms suddenly slick. "I'm sorry," I said through the wood. "It's too late. Please leave." No sound came from outside. The peephole showed an empty porch. The motion light was dead. The bulb inside it wore a halo of frost. I forced a laugh I hoped sounded normal and went to the couch, turned up the TV, and pretended I wasn't listening to the house breathe. 3:03 a.m. the next night. The bell rang again. I didn't wake this time. I was waiting for it, fully dressed, sitting in the chair by the door with the chain already latched. It felt ridiculous, like playing security guard at my own funeral. The second the time flipped from 3:02 to 3:03, the chime rang. One exact copy of itself, as if time itself made a sound when it aligned. That I went straight to the peephole. The porch was empty for 3 long breaths. Then she stepped into the frame from the left edge, as if she had been standing flat against the siding, spine aligned with the house's seam. She wore the same gray coat. It looked new and threadbare at once, untouched by weather or use, but with a fabric that remembered having been old. "May I come in?" she asked politely when I cracked the door. "No, why? It's 3 in the morning. 3:03, she corrected. "It matters." "What matters? The time or the door?" She tilted her head, and I had the unreasoned sense of a bird listening to a distant quake. "You remember the door in the house you grew up in?" she said conversationally. "The way the hinge cried whenever you tried to sneak out at night, the bubble in the paint you pressed with your thumb?" She described it exactly. The blister near the bottom panel, the rust ring around the lock, the nail someone had hammered flat when the wood split. "How do you know that?" "You pressed your thumb to it and made a vow," she said gently. "You said it like a prayer. If anyone knocks after midnight, I won't open. You thought rules protected you. They don't. They invite." The chain between us ticked in place, and for a second I thought it was a clock. She noticed me glance. "May I come in?" she asked again, smiling as if she had stepped through my memories and was now willing to take the next step. No, the word was hard-fought and small. "I rang," she said, as if etiquette were binding. "That's how it's done." I shut the door. This time I didn't check the peephole. I leaned my forehead against the wood until the cool sank through my skin, and I listened to the unnatural silence on the other side until it felt like pressure in the room, a lowering of atmospheric weight. When I finally pulled away, it was 3:07. The minute hand looked injured, as if moving had hurt it. I slept after dawn the way a hunted animal sleeps, shallow, ears pointing at every sound. When I woke around noon, the house smelled faintly of snow, though the forecast called for sun. There were no footprints on the porch. The doorbell, when I pressed it, made the normal chime. The one near the kitchen, not the one that unfolded from inside the vents. That I told myself I'd imagined the voice. I told myself I'd dreamed. I told myself a lot of things that felt true until the clock reached 3:02 again. I did what sane people do when something irrational intrudes. I introduced logic to the scene and hoped it would purify it. I unscrewed the motion light and replaced it with a fresh bulb. I checked the doorbell wiring, following the cheap cable along the baseboards and up into the white plastic chime box. I turned off the breaker and gently unscrewed the cover. Inside, 2 tarnished brass tubes formed the rails for the hammer. I took a photo with my phone like an insurance adjuster. I placed a kitchen chair against the door and set a heavy book on the seat, then balanced an empty wine bottle on top of the book so that any vibration would send the bottle to the floor. I propped a broom against the inner knob. I locked the deadbolt and slid the chain. And then I stood in the middle of the living room and laughed at myself, because none of those measures felt like they addressed what I had met outside. At 3:03 a.m., the doorbell rang. The wine bottle didn't fall. The broom stayed put. Nothing physical changed except the air temperature. I watched my breath bloom in the dark like the ghost of a dandelion clock. The chime came from everywhere this time, as if the house had learned a new language and was trying it out. A syllable rolled along the ducts, tasted by the drywall, sampled by the glass. I approached the peephole slowly, as if speed might cause reality to stutter. She stood exactly where I expected her, and something deeply tired in me hurt at that predictability. People are easier when they do unusual things. Patterns sink claws. "May I come in?" she asked. "No, why aren't you asking my name? That's not how this goes." "It is exactly how this goes," she said cheerfully, as if we were rehearsing a play. "Names, thresholds, invitations. There were rules once for a reason. We have rules because we forget the reasons." "Who are you?" I asked, because I couldn't stop myself. She pronounced a name I didn't understand. It was longer than sound. It reminded me of the underside of a bell, where the carved letters live and hold the ringing's shadow. I felt I should bow my head. "What do you want?" "To come in." She smiled wider, and I saw the hint of teeth, but the light didn't lay on them right. They seemed equal parts there and not. "Is there a child in the house?" "No." "A pet?" "No." "A mirror you look into when you feel like a stranger?" "Yes," I said before I could stop myself. She nodded as if she'd checked off the last item on a list. "May I come in?" "No." "Then meet me halfway." I heard the second chime before I understood what she meant. The sound came from the bathroom at the end of the hall. I didn't want to turn and look, but the first rule we learn, "don't look," is the one we break first. The mirror over the sink was fogging from the inside. It was subtle at first. Then a second chime sounded, and the moisture bloomed like breath, tracing out the circle where a face might press to the glass. I took a step forward, and the floorboard under my left heel sighed, and a part of me that was still very small began to cry that I shut my eyes and counted. 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3. The doorbell rang again, soft as a lullaby, exactly at 3:03, and again at 3 seconds past, and again at 6. Every 3 seconds, 3 hours, 3 minutes, and 3 seconds, 3 hours, 3 minutes, and 6 seconds, 3 hours, 3 minutes, and 9 seconds. Some ancient machine ticked through its ritual. The mirror was dripping now. The condensation gathered at the lower edge and fell in patient taps into the ceramic sink. The sound was wrong, too heavy for water. Each drop hit and thudded like a small, wet thing learning gravity. I called through the door, "Please leave." "I was never here," she said mildly. "You invited me when you listened. That's the trick of it," I realized. Attention is a kind of door. I didn't tell anyone. How do you confess that the house wants you to sign for a package from another world? People would give you their worst case of sympathy, the brand that's mostly fear in a borrowed coat. Besides, I had a sense the thing might be personal. Not because I mattered, more because all prey thinks the net was crafted for it. That afternoon, I found a package on the porch. No return address, no postage. My name was written in a looping hand that reminded me of my grandmother's grocery lists, figures standing neatly on their feet. I carried the box to the kitchen table and cut the tape with a dull knife. Inside was a doorbell. It was identical to mine, the cheap rectangular button with the smeared faux brass rim. But it was heavier. When I lifted it from the paper, the cold moved up my fingers and into my wrist like a thought. The screws were included in a small bag, along with a folded instruction sheet printed on crinkly, translucent paper. The instructions were simple: remove old bell, install new bell, connect wires, press once to test. The bottom, in the smallest font my eyes could bear, was one additional step: open only after the third chime. I laughed when I read it, but the laugh deserted me halfway up my throat and left my mouth like a cough. I put the bell back in the box and slid the box into the cupboard under the sink, where I kept misfit cookware and the ghosts of old cleaning products. The cupboard smelled like lemon in a way lemon never smells in the world. 3:03 a.m. The bell rang again, and I didn't open the door. I didn't speak. I didn't go to the mirror. I lay on the floor with a pillow over my head like a child, pretending the mattress is an island and the floor is the sea. Underneath the pillow, the chimes came like small earthquakes in the skull. Every third second, passcode, a heartbeat that had selected a pattern for its dying. Then, at 3:07, the ringing stopped. I counted to 1,000 and it did not resume. I got up, trembling and angry. Angry because fear is exhausting and I wanted to sleep. Angry because something had found the address of my life and decided to camp. I marched to the cupboard, took the box out, and installed the new bell. That I don't know why I did it. That's a lie. I know exactly why. I wanted a different story. I thought if I changed the prop, the scene might dissolve. I thought I could break the spine of a ritual I did not understand by swapping a plastic rectangle. My hands shook with cold, though the thermostat read 21. When I pressed the new bell to test it, the chime it made was exactly the sound I'd been hearing at night, clear and indecently polite, as if asking permission to enter my bones. The porch light flickered and dimmed, and the darkness didn't fall like a curtain. It exhaled. In its breath, I thought I smelled old wool and candle smoke and the iron tang of someone else's blood. That I waited. Midnight passed like the shadow of a bird over a field. 1 o'clock arrived and left without consequence. At 2, I almost slept. At 2:59, I sat up and braced without meaning to, a muscle deep in the back of my thigh tightening. 3:03 a.m. The bell rang. I didn't go to the door this time. I went to the bathroom. The mirror was already fogging when I got there. Drops crawled together and formed familiar shapes. How we see faces in clouds, dogs in wood grain. But this wasn't exactly a face. This was an outline of where a face might be if someone on the other side were learning the map of ours. The steam came from inside the glass, collecting like a breath that had forgotten which world was its own. "May I come in?" The voice came from the mirror, not the hall. My name followed it, spoken the way a mother says her child's name when calling them out of a hiding place that used to be a game and is now a danger. "No," I said, and watched my refusal this time fog the outer surface of the glass. The two mists, mine and the other, met in a seam at the center and shivered as if hungry to merge. "Then stand here," she said. "Put your ear to the door." There was a door inside the mirror. Not a hinge or a seam, not something the eyes could locate. I knew it the way you know sleep is waiting even before you close your eyes, the way you sense a shout inside a whisper. I leaned forward, and the cold met my skin with a giddy, childlike glee. From the hall, the bell chimed again, fainter than a moth landing. "If you keep ringing," I said, "the neighbors will call the police." "There are no neighbors," she said, not unkindly. "Not at this hour. Not at this address." "I have an address." "You have a habit," she corrected. "You've been practicing it for years. You leave small places and step into bigger ones until you miss the size of the old room. You turn corners hoping to outrun yourself. You stand at doors and hope a knock means a version of you is arriving that knows how to live. You made a vow. Rules. Remember? "May I come in?" "No," I whispered, not sure who I was telling it to anymore. The mirror darkened, not with night but the absence of choosing. I backed away, then ran to the front door like a child runs from a dare, fast and clumsy. The way a body tries to get out from under itself. I put my face to the peephole. She wasn't there. There was a weather where she had been. A circular spot of air that looked cooler than the rest, shimmering like a heat wave. The porch boards under it showed a ring not of moisture but of age. The wood had been pressed, no, not pressed. That implied downward force. This was pulled thin, as if something had lifted time out of it by the thimbleful. "Please," I said to nothing. I didn't know what I was asking for. An end. A beginning with a different shape. A stranger's kindness. A rule. The third chime sounded, and this is the part one kept to myself for months. My front door unlocked. I didn't touch it. The deadbolt turned itself with a delicate, respectful click, as if a hotel clerk had mastered the art of entering rooms without startling guests. The chain lifted, fell, and hooked itself on the knob like a scarf choosing its owner. The knob turned a quarter inch and stopped. Not because of a force, but because a choreography had ended and the next movement required my part. I didn't open it. I didn't breathe for so long my chest ached with flowers of pain. I stood and watched the line where the door and frame kissed, as if watching a mouth that might or might not say my name. I felt a draft move through me and into the hall. My bathroom door swung softly. The mirror made a sound like a wet finger circling the rim of a glass. 3:07 a.m. Silence returned like a tax. Days went wrong in small, stupid ways that week. I poured milk that had soured overnight in a fridge that wasn't failing. My phone glitched whenever I tried to set an alarm for 3:02 or 3:04. It offered me 3:03 and nothing else, as if my device had turned friendly to whatever wanted in. A colleague asked if I was sleeping. I said yes too quickly, and she stared at my eyes as if checking whether the pupils worked like doors. I dreamed about houses I'd never lived in. In each one, the doorbell had a different voice. One chimed like laughter behind a curtain. One sounded like nails dragged across a porcelain plate from the wrong side. One didn't ring at all. It wrote a word under my skin in backward letters, so I had to read it in the mirror in the morning. Open. I stopped napping on the couch. I slept in the hallway on a yoga mat I unrolled perpendicular to the front door. It felt like lying across the tracks, daring the train to show. The second night, I found gray salt at the threshold of the bathroom. A line of it laid like a border. I didn't own salt like that. When I stepped over it, I tracked a perfect footprint into the room that didn't look like mine. The heel was wrong, narrow, and slightly pointed, as if the foot had remembered wearing heels for so long it kept the shape when naked. I started reading. Old house legends. Rituals that sounded like recipes. Iron above the door, rowan twigs, words to say in triplicate. I remembered something my grandmother had told me when I was small and frightened of a story about a woman who ate children. Not everything that knocks wishes to be invited, she said. Some things wish to be counted. I didn't understand it then. I began to suspect I wouldn't understand it now. At 3:03 the next morning. The bell didn't ring. I woke anyway. It's terrible how the body prepares for what it hates. I lay on the mat and listened to a silence that had learned how to lean. Then I heard movement, not outside the door but inside the walls. The soft friction of something adjusting itself within a cramped space to face you properly. I went to the bathroom. The mirror was clear. My face looked like a borrowed version of itself. It would have lied for me if a stranger asked if I was okay. I reached up to touch the glass. Not to test it, not to open anything, just to feel a cool certainty, and discovered the surface was not where my fingers expected it to be. It was closer. The glass had thickened outward by about 1 millimeter. Not much. Enough. It was like placing your hand on a sleeping animal that had crept closer for warmth. I backed away. Heart peeled thin. The hallway felt longer than the house could support. Doors were positioned where they had always been, but space dilated. The way a mouth widens when you look at it too long and remember it's an entrance to a body. The bell rang once, very softly. Not the doorbell. A bell in the house. One I did not own. The sound came from the attic. My attic was a mean space. A triangle of insulation thick with spiderwork and old decisions. It didn't have a pull-down ladder, only a square hatch and a hook screwed into the ceiling. In 4 years, I had never been up there. Things left alone can be loyal like that. At T303, I stood beneath the hatch with a step stool and a broom to hook the string. I shouldn't have gotten the stool. I shouldn't have thought this was my job. But the bell kept ringing, patient, as if waiting for me to match its pace. Every 3 seconds, 3 hours, 3 minutes, and 3 seconds, 3 hours, 3 minutes, and 6 seconds. The attic asked to be looked at. I pulled the hatch open. Cold air unrolled like an old carpet. The bell rang again, and I recognized it suddenly. A handbell, the kind you picture a teacher holding in a village school. The kind a sexton rings for the dead. I climbed. I lifted my head into the attic and saw a small space where old insulation was tamped down into a circle. In the center of the circle sat the box I had discarded, The original doorbell, the one I had removed. The bell sat on the box like a paperweight. The air around it shimmered faintly. The shadows had a habit. And there, in the insulation near the circle, were footprints. Not heavy ones. Delicate, like someone had walked on their toes. "May I come in?" the voice asked from below, from the front door where no one stood and where every house in the world waited to agree. "No," I said, and meant it more than I had ever meant anything. "Then meet me where houses end." The handbell rang once more. The attic darkened. Not like losing light, but like the darkness itself had sipped something stronger and was now bold on my tongue. I descended the steps backwards, as if leaving a church. When my heels touched the hallway hardwood, the bathroom mirror side, I didn't run. I walked. My body had decided to honor the ritual since I couldn't outrun it in the bathroom. The mirror bulged outward in a slow, horrific swell. Not much, just a breath, pressing the world's skin a shade too far. I could imagine the same thing happening on every reflective surface in the house, in every house that had ever hosted a human face. It wasn't a door, not exactly. It was an agreement to meet where edges are thin. "Look," she said, and I looked. I don't know if a second face appeared because I saw it in the glass or because it had always been there and my eyes were tired enough now to recognize kin. The face was wrong in the tiny ways. Eyes placed a fraction higher, mouth a shade narrower. Not a twin. An ancestor, maybe, or the person that asks to wear you when you sleep. "Say the word," she said. "Not the old invitation. The new one. I don't know it. You do." I closed my eyes and felt the house around me the way a blind person counts the furniture. I felt the door and its chain, the attic hatch and its hook, the attic dust like an old choir. I felt the doorbell wiring like veins. I felt where the first vow lived inside me. If anyone knocks after midnight, I won't open. And I saw the childish logic of thinking prohibitions are walls rather than chalk lines. I opened my eyes and said, "I refuse." The mirror smiled with my mouth. "That isn't the word," she said. That I swallowed. "No," I said again, but it didn't arrive in the air like a word does. It fell straight down inside me and landed where the vow lived. It broke something old and tender there, and a softness spilled, and a small voice, the one that prays, said, "Please." "I won't invite you," I said aloud. "You already did," she said gently. "3 nights ago. You opened the door by listening." My throat closed. "Then what do you want? What is the point?" "What?" "It's 3:03, she said, as if that answered everything, as if the time itself had a mouth, as if some primordial inner door between your first dream and your last breath swings on that hinge and everything that will never be you stands on the other side to take attendance. The mirror spooned out another breath onto my face. The glass was so close it could have been skin. Under my left ear, I heard my pulse in hers, the other one braiding. "Please," I said again. "Please." "That is the word," she said, mouth curling. "But for whom?" I didn't know. For me. For mercy. For the old vow. For the child pressing a thumb into a bubble of paint and believing that lines spoken at night make walls where monsters can't pass. I rested my forehead against the mirror and the chill sunk in and the room leaned and I felt something behind the glass lean too, as if we were both tired enough to forgive the door its job from the hall. The front door unlatched again, respectful, shy. "May I come in?" she asked once more, not from the hall and not from the glass, but from the place that splits the difference, the thin seam where you wake into a dream already in progress. That I lifted my head. No, she didn't argue. The mirror cleared. The house inhaled. The front door stayed unlocked until dawn. It didn't end. That kind of thing doesn't. We like ends because they let us feel our hands are good at holding. But there are only ever arrangements we survive for a while. Some nights, the bell rings at 3:03 and I lie very still and listen and don't go to the door and don't go to the mirror. Sometimes it rings in the bathroom and the fog writes a circle where a face might lean, and I lean mine and say, "No," like a tendon doing its job. Once in a while, the handbell in the attic answers, and I think of a village that keeps time with a sound made for grief, and I let the sound move through me like weather. The rules, if there are any, are these: do not ask for a name you cannot hold. Do not answer a door with your listening. Leave the chain on the world you've built, even if it lifts itself at 3 in the morning. The porch light has learned the hour. It dims when the minute flips, as if consenting to a custom no one can remember. The new doorbell stays installed. I've learned you can't put a genie back into a button. The original sits in the attic with the handbell on top of it like a hat. Someday I'll take it down and bury it in the yard the way a dog buries a bone it knows belongs to someone more dangerous. That I think of my grandmother sometimes, of her saying that some things wish to be counted. Maybe that's what the bell is doing, taking attendance of the almost. Every night at 3:03, the house totters on the edge of being two houses. One where I open and one where I refuse. I keep living in the latter because I'd like to sleep more nights than I don't. But I know there's a door that stays forever mostly closed and forever almost open. A mirror that grows a millimeter on its best nights and learns my breath on its worst. And a voice that will, until I die, ask for the courtesy I don't owe and the law I can't change. After a while you stop listening for the bell. You start listening for what it collects. There are other houses on other streets behind yours, in other centuries behind this one, and their bells gather into a choir that hums under everything we call the day. When your life goes quiet enough, you can hear it. A polite, indecent, patient sound. A sound that knows your vow by heart and loves you anyway. Last night, because I am a fool that loves repetition, I stood by the door at 3:02 and watched the minute bleed. The chime came. The chain rose a fraction and settled as if reconsidering the rules. The mirror fogged. The attic waited with old-school air. I said nothing. I didn't pray. I let the house perform its sentence. At 3:07, everything stilled. I slept, and I dreamed I opened the door. In the dream, she did not step in. She stood on the threshold and looked over my shoulder at the rooms I had made and the life I had barely learned to occupy. And she smiled the way you smile when you recognize the architecture of a mistake you love too much to stop making. "Not tonight," she said. "Not tonight." I agreed, and then I woke to sunlight and the smell of lemons that were never lemons and the certainty that when night deepened and the hinges of time met and kissed, the doorbell would ring again at 3:03 a.m., and I would refuse in a voice steady enough to pass for a rule, until the night I won't, which is not a surrender but another word for please. The bell will ring. I will count, and the house will keep the tally that houses keep. The number of times we did not open, and the number of